unlock your world one word at a time, because language isn't just about learning, it's about living. Learning a new language isn't just about words. It's about expanding your horizons, enhancing your career, and connecting with people globally. Whether you are a language learner or educator, the Languages Pedagogy Podcast is your go-to resource for expert insights, innovative strategies, and practical tips to supercharge your language journey. Tune in now to sharpen your skills, deepen your understanding, and join a community passionate about the power of language. Let's get started. Wonderful listeners, welcome to the 50th episode of the Languages Pedagogy Podcast. Can you believe we've hit 50 episodes? It's been such a rewarding journey, and I'm so grateful to have you all along for the ride. Today, we're diving into a topic that is essential for anyone serious about language mastery: pronunciation. It's one thing to learn a language and grammar of a language, but sounding more like a native speaker is often the final, and perhaps most elusive, piece of the puzzle. Many learners struggle with pronunciation, but it's not something that should intimidate you. With the right techniques and consistent practice, you can significantly improve your pronunciation. In today's episode, we're going to talk about techniques that really work for mastering pronunciation. I'll guide you through some practical exercises that can help you develop native-like pronunciation, no matter what language you're learning. Whether you're an English learner focusing on vowel sounds or a Spanish learner trying to roll your R's. This episode will give you actionable strategies to make real progress. Ready to get started? Let's jump in.
Audio Jungle.
Before we dive into techniques and exercises, let's talk about why pronunciation is so important in language learning. Good pronunciation is more than just a superficial skill. It's about clarity and confidence. When your pronunciation is on point, people can understand you more easily. But it's not just about being understood. It's also about feeling confident when you speak. If you're constantly worried that you're not pronouncing things correctly, that anxiety can hold you back from speaking at all. There's also the cultural connection that comes with mastering pronunciation. Getting closer to native-like pronunciation allows you to connect more deeply with native speakers, as they recognize the effort you're putting into sound more like them. It can help build rapport and show respect for the language and its culture. Finally, focusing on pronunciation can improve your listening skills. When you can accurately produce sound, your ear becomes more attuned to hearing them, making it easier to understand native speakers. So now that we know why it's important, let's get into some strategies and techniques for improving pronunciation. The first technique we're going to dive into is the listen, imitate, repeat method. This is one of the most fundamental and effective ways to improve pronunciation, and it can be adapted to any language you're learning. 1. Listen to native speakers. The first step is to immerse yourself in how native speakers sound. You want to listen carefully to how they pronounce words, focusing not just on individual sounds but also on intonation, rhythm, and stress. Pay attention to how their speech flows. Are there certain syllables they emphasize? How do their voices rise and fall in a sentence? Here's a tip. Choose content that reflects how people speak in everyday life. Podcasts, interviews, movies, and casual conversations are perfect for this. Try platforms like YouTube or Netflix to find real unscripted speech. 2. Imitate. Once you've done some active listening, it's time to imitate what you've heard. This means trying to replicate the sounds as closely as possible. When you imitate, focus on the way native speakers move their mouth, tongue, and lips. If you're unsure, watch videos where you can see their faces as they speak. 3. Repeat. Repetition is key. You want to practice saying the same phrases or sentences over and over until it feels natural. Don't rush through this step. The goal is to build muscle memory in your mouth so that the correct pronunciation starts to feel automatic. Here's a little exercise. Choose a short sentence or phrase and repeat it out loud 10 times in a row. Record yourself and compare it to the original speaker to identify these areas for improvement. The next technique is shadowing, which is an advanced but highly effective method for mastering pronunciation. Shadowing involves listening to a recording of a native speaker and speaking along with them in real time, as closely as possible. 1. Pick your material. Start by choosing a short audio clip or video. It could be anything from a dialogue in a TV show to a podcast episode or even a speech. Ideally, choose something where the speaker talks at a natural pace. 2. Listen first. Before you start shadowing, listen to the clip a couple of times to familiarize yourself with the content. Pay close attention to pronunciation, rhythm, and intonation. 3. Speak along. Now, as the speaker talks, you'll shadow them, meaning you'll repeat what they're saying, trying to match their timing, pronunciation, and intonation as closely as possible. Don't worry if you can keep up at first. This takes practice. 4. Break it down. If the speaker is too fast, break the shadowing exercise into smaller chunks. Shadow one sentence or phrase at a time until you can follow along without stumbling. Here's an exercise. Try shadowing a short YouTube video or podcast episode. Begin with just 30 seconds, focusing on matching the speaker's pronunciation and rhythm. Gradually, increase the length of the clip as you improve. For many learners, the hardest part of pronunciation is producing unfamiliar sounds. This is where understanding mouth and tongue positioning becomes essential. Every language has sounds that might not exist in your native tongue, and mastering these sounds often comes down to physical positioning. 1. Vowel sounds. Let's start with vowels. In English, for instance, vowel sounds can be quite tricky because there are so many subtle variations. The position of your tongue and lips determines whether you produce the correct sound. For example, to produce the sound in sheep, your tongue should be high and towards the front of your mouth, while for ship, it should be lower. 2. Consonants. Consonants like TH in English or the rolled R in Spanish are difficult for many learners because they require precise tongue movements. For the TH sound, your tongue should rest between your teeth. For a rolled R, the tip of your tongue should vibrate lightly against the roof of your mouth. 3. Practice isolating sounds. A great way to improve your pronunciation of difficult sounds is to isolate them and practice them repeatedly. For example, if you struggle with the Spanish R, practice saying words that start with an R sound in isolation before moving to more complex sentences. Here's an exercise. Spend 5 minutes practicing the placement of your tongue and lips for difficult sounds in your target language. Use a mirror to make sure your mouth is in the correct position and repeat each sound several times until it feels natural. One of the most effective ways to improve your pronunciation is to record yourself and listen back. This technique allows you to hear what your speech sounds like from an outsider's perspective and gives you the chance to critique your own pronunciation. 1. Choose material to record. Start by selecting a short passage, dialogue, or phrase in your target language. It's best to pick something you've already listened to a native speaker say, so you have a reference point for comparison. 2. Record yourself speaking. Using your phone or any recording device, record yourself speaking the passage out loud. Don't worry about perfection. This is just to give you a baseline to work from. 3. Compare with a native speaker. Play back your recording and compare it to the original audio. Listen carefully for differences in intonation, rhythm, and pronunciation. Are there sounds you're not hitting correctly? Is your speech too fast or too slow? Identify specific areas where you can improve. 4. Practice and record again. After analyzing your recording, practice the passage again and record a second version. Keep repeating this process until you feel your pronunciation is closer to that of the native speaker. Here's a little exercise. Record a 30-second speech in your target language. Then listen back and compare it to a native speaker. Focus on improving one aspect of your pronunciation at a time, whether it's vowels, consonants, or intonation, and record or re-record until you're satisfied with your progress. Minimal pairs are pairs of words that differ by only one sound, such as bat and pat in English or pero and perro in Spanish. Practicing minimal pairs is an excellent way to fine-tune your ability to distinguish and pronounce similar sounds. 1. Find minimal pairs. Start by identifying minimal pairs in your target language that are difficult for you to pronounce. You can find a list of minimal pairs online. You can create your own based on sounds you struggle with. 2. Practice saying each pair. Say each word in the pair slowly and clearly, paying close attention to the sound that differentiates them. For example, in English, practice saying bit and beat, focusing on the subtle difference between the short I and long E sounds. 3. Record and listen. Just like in the previous technique, it can be helpful to record yourself saying the minimal pairs. Listen back and check whether the difference in sounds is clear and consistent. 4. Use in context. Once you're comfortable with minimal pairs in isolation, start using them in sentences. This will help you integrate the correct pronunciation into your speech and ensure that the sounds are clear in real-world context. Here's another exercise. Practice 5 sets of minimal pairs in your target language, alternating between the two words until the difference in sound is clear. Then, use each word in a sentence to practice using the correct pronunciation in context. Good pronunciation isn't just about producing individual sounds. It's also about intonation and stress patterns. These elements give the language its natural rhythm and can make a huge difference in how native-like your speech sounds. 1. Listen for intonation. Intonation refers to the rise and fall of the voice in speech. Different languages have different intonation patterns. In English, for example, questions often end with a rising intonation, while statements end with a falling intonation. 2. Mark the stress. In many languages, stress patterns are crucial to getting the pronunciation right. In Spanish, for instance, the stress usually falls on the penultimate syllable, unless there's an accent mark indicating otherwise. In English, stress placement can completely change the meaning of the word. For example, record, noun, versus record, the verb. 3. Mimic the natural rhythm. Pay attention to the rhythm of native speakers. Are they speaking quickly and smoothly, or are there natural pauses? Practice mimicking the way they group words and emphasize certain syllables. Here's another exercise. Take a short sentence in your target language and mark the stressed syllables and the intonation pattern. Practice saying the sentence out loud, focusing on matching the natural rhythm and stress patterns of native speakers. To really master pronunciation, it's important to make it a daily part of your language learning routine. Here are some tips for incorporating pronunciation practice into your everyday schedule. 1. Start with pronunciation warm-ups. Just like athletes warm up before a game, you should start your language practice with your pronunciation exercises. Spend the first 5 to 10 minutes of each study session focusing on difficult sounds, tongue twisters, or minimal pairs. 2. Use language apps with pronunciation features. Apps like Forvo Speech or Pimsleur have pronunciation-specific features that allow you to practice difficult sound and compare your pronunciation to native speakers. Make this a regular part of your practice routine. 3. Practice in short bursts. Pronunciation practice doesn't have to be a long, drawn-out process. Even spending 5 minutes a day focusing on tricky sound or mimicking native speakers can lead to significant improvement over time. 4. Use a mirror. When practicing pronunciation, use a mirror to check the position of your mouth, lips, and tongue. The visual feedback can help you identify whether you're forming the sound correctly. Here's an exercise. Dedicate 5 minutes at the beginning of each day to practicing a specific pronunciation challenge, whether it's a tricky consonant, a vowel sound, or intonation pattern. Pronunciation is one of the most challenging aspects of language learning, but it's also one of the most rewarding. By mastering pronunciation, you'll not only be understood more clearly, but also feel more confident in your speaking abilities. Remember that it's a process that requires consistent practice, patience, and willingness to make mistakes along the way. We covered a lot of ground today, from the listen, imitate, repeat technique to shadowing minimal pairs and more. I encourage you to try it out, the exercises we discussed, and incorporate them into your daily practice. Keep pushing yourself and don't be afraid to make mistakes. It's all part of the journey. Hey, before we continue, I just want to remind you that new episodes drop every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, so make sure to tune in weekly for your dose of thought-provoking conversations. Also, you can find our show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. And don't forget to come and pay a visit to our website, mikeenglishonline.com. You will find tons of materials and a lot of resources there that you can actually apply in your class or for yourself. Subscribe, rate, and follow us for more. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Languages Pedagogy Podcast. I'd love to hear how these pronunciation techniques work for you. Feel free to reach out and share your experiences or ask any questions you may have. Until next time, keep practicing, stay curious, and embrace the challenge of mastering pronunciation.